Hey guys, what is up and welcome to a new NVIDIA update video. So today, as per usual, let's go over the NVIDIA stock. Let's go over what's happening today, what we can expect moving forward into a pretty massive week with, of course, NVIDIA earnings happening on what is this, I believe, Wednesday, if I'm not mistaken. So that's going to be a pretty massive situation occurring there. We'll see how that plays out, but I'll give you my thoughts moving into the earnings. Obviously, keep in mind, earnings, especially NVIDIA, is a pretty unpredictable catalyst. It's very hard to predict. I would argue impossible to predict, and technical analysis does weaken around such massive catalysts, especially like a stock like NVIDIA and some earnings like NVIDIA. So keep in mind, technical analysis does weaken around this. So you want to kind of, at least in my opinion, just my opinion, you want to be a little bit on the more conservative side. But again, let's just jump into it. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to hit that like button. This is not financial advice. I am not a financial advisor. And of course, my membership section is live for just $2.99 a month. You get access to all my intraday thoughts, post updates on Tesla, and sometimes other stocks as well. But for $4.99, you get access to all of that, plus my NVIDIA daily updates as well. So if you're interested, that link is in the description of the video. It's a YouTube membership. But jumping into it, NVIDIA closing the day down 2.25%, closing the day at about $126.50 per share, which compared to the market is a bit of an under. Actually, it's maybe a slight underperformance, but nothing too crazy to write home about. Now, what does this mean moving forward? So let's talk about it. Let's look at the daily chart first really quickly. Like I said many times before, NVIDIA, actually on the daily chart, there are some signs that are actually giving me some concern, right? Maybe remember during this whole rally, we've been talking about how NVIDIA, there's just nothing bearish really. There's very little bearish things about the daily chart. Well, there are some bearish signs finally starting to emerge. They're not completely overwhelmingly bearish, but they are hints of it. What are they? Well, the stochastic and the BX trender, right? The stochastic, you can see bearish crossover. Not ideal. I mean, again, I want to make it clear, many bearish crossovers here, clearly they didn't mean anything, especially with the catalyst like NVIDIA earnings coming out. But what did mean something eventually is the fact that after quite some overbought time up in this range, we did ultimately come back down to the opposite side of the spectrum. That will happen at some point eventually. It's just a matter of, do we continue rallying? And then when we do come back down to the opposite side of the spectrum, it'll come down lower, if you will, if that makes sense. You know what I mean? So I hope that makes sense. But that's one concern. The next concern I have is the BX trender. The BX trender is now making another lower high, and the band has officially started to turn red, showing some bearish momentum starting to slowly seep in, right? So those are the main signs I would say on the daily that are still concerning. The bullish signs is, well, the MACD is still looking pretty solid. It is making lower highs, but still bullish crossover. So the momentum is still bullish. Our size still looks pretty fine in my opinion as well. So keep that in mind. But the main thing I'll be looking at on the daily chart as well, you can see, we're still retesting this trend line. We're kind of going back and forth between it. I'm not a huge fan of that, I'll be honest, but today we did come back to the trend line. We did kind of bounce off of it and we're barely holding above it, which is nice to see. But the main way I'll be looking at it moving forward, especially with earnings, honestly, just not to overcomplicate things, because the daily chart, the actual chart itself looks a little bit, I'm not a fan of the way it looks. It's just hard to read. 1 hour is where I like things a little bit more. Why? Because it's just a lot more simple. And the reason it's more simple is because, well, you can see we're just trading in a simple range, right? We're just kind of zigzagging between this range right now, this overall range right here. So what you want to be looking for is going to be essentially just, do we eventually break out of this range, right? That's what we want to wait for, right? The range at the top is about $130 per share. The range at the bottom, honestly, is about, we'll say, $123 per share. That's what you want to wait for, in my opinion. Just what I'm thinking, right? If you want to be really safe about it, if you don't want to get whiplash in this kind of, back and forth seesaw price action, if you will, a break above 130 sends it to 135-ish, in my opinion, right? A break below 123 most likely sends it to about 120 to as low as 117 before, finding some true real support. That's just the way I'm looking at it moving forward, right? And that's kind of what I am waiting for. I'm not going to be rushing into it, especially with earnings coming up. Who knows how that's going to be? NVIDIA has run up pretty handsomely into earnings, right? And it's holding decently well, honestly. It's holding pretty damn well with all things considered. So we'll see how it plays out, right? We'll see how it plays out. I mean, you always want to take things, take a look at the market as well, right? The market's showing similar signs as NVIDIA, right? It's looking pretty solid still, but there are some bearish signs slowly seeping in, especially for QQQ. Same as NVIDIA, bearish crossover on the stochastic, lower highs on the BX trender. The market is barely hanging on to a pretty important support level, right? If we lost the support level today at this like 473, 474 range, could have been bad, right? It could have definitely been a little bit more of an ugly day. Well, we didn't. But if it does, I'm sure you can probably, take a guess as to what to expect, right? And that's kind of the idea with NVIDIA. So again, just to make things really simple, not to overcomplicate things, because the daily chart, in my opinion, looks a little bit complicated. You want to wait for in my opinion, 130 to 123. One of those levels will break eventually. Who knows which one? No reason to guess. Nobody knows. I promise you, nobody knows. But one of them will give, and that's most likely once we finally break that range, the range or the direction will keep going in respectively. So again, 130 break probably leads to 135. 123 break probably leads to 120 to 117, that general range, right? And that's just the way I look at it. And that's just the simple way to do it, not to overcomplicate it, not to make it too difficult. And in terms of options flow, by the way, NVIDIA did have the most bearish option flow today. You can see 55 million bearish confirmed options flow. So that's a little bit on the concerning side, right? So definitely want to kind of keep your eyes on that, especially moving into a day like a week like earnings. So that'll be pretty interesting to see how that goes. But yeah, that's kind of what I'm seeing. Ladies and gentlemen, let me know what you think down below. If you enjoyed and found this video useful, helpful, or whatever, don't forget to hit that like button. But all that being said and done, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you for the next one. Peace.